The next topic of communicable diseases we will be dealing with is dengue fever. Now, dengue fever is having so many other names like breakbone fever and dandy fever, but commonly we are referring it as dengue fever. Now, dengue fever is commonly occurring because of the bite of mosquitoes, and the mosquitoes which is responsible for dengue fever is referred as Aedes mosquitoes. Okay, we'll see the both the mosquitoes here. It is seen in the figure here, Aedes aegypti mosquito, and we have also got Aedes albopicus mosquito. So both of these mosquitoes are responsible, but commonly Aedes aegypti mosquito is responsible for dengue. Now, dengue is actually caused by a virus, okay, and particularly it is commonly prevalent in India also, and it is appearing in different forms. It could be in the form of dengue fever, dengue hemorrhagic fever, also we refer it as, or it can occur with or without shock, and it is commonly caused by the bite of the mosquito, and mainly it is transmitted by the bite of the female Aedes aegypti mosquito. And the more characteristics of this Aedes mosquito is that it usually bites during the daytime and even during the evening or night times, and it lays its egg usually in clean or shady stagnant water. And the distinct feature of this mosquito is it is black with white strips in its body, and this dengue is caused by one of the four related viruses, that is dengue 1, 2, dengue 3, and dengue 4. So either of these viruses may be responsible. And what happens is particularly the mosquito will be biting a person who is carrying the virus. Okay, the mosquito is not infected here. The mosquito will bite an infected person with the virus, and after biting this infected person with the virus, they will also carry the virus. So maybe after 4 or 5 days, when this mosquito will bite another individual, it may result in usually dengue. Okay, and commonly it this dengue is seen in the rainy season, that is from the period of June to up till October. It is commonly seen. So this I have already told just now. That is, the person gets dengue mainly because of the bite of the mosquitoes. Okay, and usually the mosquito will bite an infected person with the virus. Okay, then they will be, when they ingest the blood of that infected person, they will carry the virus. Okay, and then after 8 to 10 days, what happens is the dengue itself will become infected with the virus, and then they will transmit the infection to other person. When they are biting a normal person, they will transmit that virus. So always remember that the mosquito is getting that virus from biting an infected person only. Now, why does here I have already told only the female Aedes aegypti mosquito is biting. Now, why does the female mosquito bite? Most of the time, the female mosquito bites because it needs protein in order to develop its egg. So that is why it is biting the man. Next is risk factors. Now, most of the time, the risk factors are all the age groups may be affected, children or even old age people or middle aged people. Then it is of high risk when the person is having any secondary infections. It could be tuberculosis, diabetes, hypertension, and all. It is also very much seen in genetic predisposition, people with low immunity also, then people who have chronic diseases like asthma or diabetes are at high risk, or people who have low immunity because of malnutrition, because of cancer or HIV patients, they are also at high risk of developing dengue. Then it is common in certain regions, certain specific geographic location or certain region it could be common. It could be because of the temperature. So this is all the breeding places where you can find an Aedes mosquito. Okay. So wherever water will be stagnant, in all these places we can find the breeding of the mosquito. Next is regarding this pathophysiology, which I have already discussed it. The transmission of this dengue virus happens when the mosquito, that is Aedes mosquito, will bite a dengue infected person. Okay, they are not already infected now. The Aedes mosquito will bite the dengue infected person and they will carry the virus. Okay, that is, they will be affected by the virus. Okay, after that, what happens is after a period of 5 to 7 days, this mosquito will, when it is biting another individual, it will result in dengue. So that is how it results in dengue because of biting another individual. Okay, and usually the symptoms can range from 3 to 14 days. That is average of 4 to 7 days. It may need to the symptoms to occur after the bite. Next is regarding the classification of dengue. This one is very important. It can be usually asked for exam. We have got classification of dengue, classical dengue fever, dengue hemorrhagic fever, and dengue shock syndrome. Okay. So first one we will move on to classical dengue fever. Now, classical dengue fever, also referred as a breakbone fever, it is nothing but happening because of the dengue virus. Okay, and usually, first what happens is they will be having fever along with chills, then headache will start. They may have joint pain, muscle pain. They may also complain of sore throat and swollen glands may be there, that is lymphadenopathy. Symptoms are same to that of flu here. Okay, and how transmission of this dengue fever happens already I told, from infected man, then mosquito, and then again to a normal person. So Aedes mosquito becomes infective by feeding on a patient who is having the virus. Okay, then this infective mosquito which gets infected by the virus, when it is biting a normal person, it will transmit the dengue. So flu-like symptoms will be there initially. After that, after 24 to 48 hours, patient can develop photophobia, that is sensitivity to light. Along with that, eye pain may be there, weakness, anorexia, then change in the taste sensation. Some people also complain of abdominal pain and abdominal tenderness. That is, when they are touching abdomen, they may have pain. Along with that, nausea and sore throat may be seen. And most of the time, skin rashes are very common in a person with dengue. That is, during the remission period, what happens is there will be development of pinpoint rashes will develop, especially on the face, neck, and in the chest region. Now, along with the skin rashes could have lot of itching also, and these rashes will be lasting for 2 to 3 days. Next one is regarding dengue hemorrhagic fever. So dengue hemorrhagic fever is comparatively more severe form of dengue. Okay, why this stage happens is mainly because of double infection with the dengue virus. Maybe two viruses have resulted in infection that is resulting in dengue hemorrhagic fever. So here what happens is following the incubation period of 4 to 6 days along with the fever, then headache, nausea, anorexia, vomiting, abdominal pain and tenderness, along with those symptoms, the patient can have severe other symptoms. That is, the patient's platelet count may be reduced. Okay, or along with that, what happens is because of the low platelet count, they can also have thrombocytopenia. Okay, thrombocyte counts are reduced here, and that may cause plasma leakage. So what happens when your platelets are reduced? Obviously, you are at high risk of bleeding. Okay, so what will happen? Excess of bleeding may be there in the patient. That may cause ecchymosis. Okay, that is bleeding underneath the skin. Epistaxis, that is bleeding of the nose. Hematuria, that is blood will be seen in the urine. Bleeding gums or GI bleeding, and melena also may be seen, that is blood in the stools. Along with that, the patient can also have complete liver damage, which can cause hepatomegaly, liver enlargement. Then it can cause again dyspnea and sometimes signs and symptoms of shock because of the hypotension. Later, what happens is if this dengue hemorrhagic fever is not treated, it will result in the next stage that is called as dengue shock syndrome. Okay, now in dengue shock syndrome, same symptoms may be seen as dengue hemorrhagic fever, but along with that, the patient may have symptoms of shock because of the hypotension. So, what are the symptoms of shock? Usually, the patient will be having rapid and weak pulse. Skin will be very cold and clammy to touch. The BP will be reduced. They will be highly restless, dehydrated, and that may in turn result in some other complications also. Next is how will you diagnose dengue? History can be asked, physical examination, that is, you can assess the rashes, C for hepatomegaly, C for low blood pressure or weak pulse. Next is you can perform blood investigations like CBC, hematocrit levels can be assessed, platelet count is reduced here. You can see for liver enzymes, electrolytes can be assessed. Then along with that, platelet, you can also check for prothrombin time, INR, that is international normalized ratio, bleeding time and clotting time also can be assessed. Then to particularly find out regarding the dengue virus, you can perform polymerase chain reaction and IgM antibodies can be detected. Sometimes in order to do the to detect this dengue, they will also perform tourniquet test. That is, they will tie the tourniquet or they can tie the BP cuff tightly and they will observe or they will count the number of petechiae. Petechiae means pinpoint rashes. Along with that, X-rays also can be done to see if they have got any complications. Then most of the time they can also perform the serum studies, that is to find out regarding the dengue antigen. Now treatment, most of the time the treatment is particularly not there for dengue. You can perform or provide them with strict bed rest, give IV fluids to the patient, tell them to maintain adequate hygiene, insect control, that is especially vector control or mosquito control has to be done. You can use mosquito repellents and adequate patient education should be given. Most of the time you have to advise the patient to take adequate IV, this oral fluids. Okay. Now, when you are advising bed rest to the patient, tell the patient to take more oral fluids. Maybe you can ask them to take more of milk, fruit juices can be advised, more barley water, electrolytes, or plain water can be advised so that they will not go into dehydration and hypotension. If they have high fever, you can obviously give antipyretics like paracetamol, tepid sponging can be given, or sponge bath can also be given to the patient. Next is to, if they are having headache, you can give analgesics, but always check for aspirin. Excess of aspirin or NSAIDs may not be advised for the patient. Some home remedies like use of papayas, asking the patient to eat papaya or even kiwi fruit is told to be advisable. Next is preventing the breeding of mosquitoes is essential. Use mosquito repellents. Most of the time you can advise the patient to wear long sleeve clothes or long sleeve pants so that they can protect themselves from the bite of mosquitoes. Then antibiotics usually are not essential unless and until they have developed a secondary infection. Then this is all regarding how to control the vectors. Now, whenever there is breeding of mosquitoes or stagnant water, try to avoid the breeding of mosquitoes. Okay, change the water. Then you can destroy the bleeding places of the mosquitoes. Remove all the empty bottles or empty tires or empty cans wherever water is getting stagnant. Then next is wherever this breeding chances are there in the drain, there you can pour certain other repellents or insecticides can be used. Or in certain places, fishes are also introduced so that they will eat the larva that is present of the mosquitoes. Then you can use certain chemicals or other insecticides to control the mosquito. Now, next is most of the time what happens is the platelet counts will be continuously reduced in a person with dengue. So to avoid that, you can give fresh frozen plasma to the patient. Okay, you need not transfuse whole blood. So instead of that, FFP, that is fresh frozen plasma, will be given. And frequently, you should monitor the patient's bleeding time, clotting time, as well as you have to monitor the platelet count of the patient so that the platelets are not getting reduced a lot and that will not result in bleeding. Next is always you can hold community council meetings regarding dengue, then teach the participants or you can provide with health education to the family members or to the people in the community. You can organize training sessions where you can teach the importance of controlling the mosquitoes. Then you can conduct surveys regarding the mosquito problem. Then in the schools also you can conduct certain inspections regarding dengue or you can teach them how to control the dengues and all. So most of the time publicity or health education is essential to control the dengue. So always remember that whenever you're teaching them regarding health education, tell them regarding good quality mosquito nets. Tell them to use mosquito repellents like coils, mats, or spray. sometimes some people who are allergic or who have respiratory infections may not be tolerating these coils and all, then tell them to cover all the containers wherever there is breeding of mosquito. Then you can contact the local municipal board. Then always close all the doors and windows at least before 5 or 6 o'clock so that these mosquitoes will not enter the house. The next topic we will be dealing with is regarding typhoid fever. Now, typhoid fever is also referred as enteric fever, and most of the time, typhoid fever or enteric fever it is caused by Salmonella typhi. So, Salmonella typhi is the main organism that is responsible, or one more organism that is responsible is Salmonella paratyphi. And this typhoid is sometimes told to be responsible for lot of morbidity and mortality also, and it is a food and waterborne disease. So next is regarding the causes of typhoid or enteric fever. Now, as we have already discussed in the previous slide, typhoid fever or enteric fever, it is mainly caused by Salmonella typhi or Salmonella paratyphi. That is the main cause of typhoid or enteric fever. Other than that, it is this Salmonella typhi is a gram-negative bacilli, and transmission, as I have already told, it is mainly caused by contaminated food and water, okay, or close contact with the infected person, whom we call it as a carrier. And other than that, sometimes flies and cockroaches can also transmit this condition. Now, most of the time, what happens is the source of infection is the feces or the urine of the carrier, or sometimes the unwashed hands or the fingers of the person who is infected already. And even the typhoid bacilli can be excreted in the sputum and the milk. So that is how what happens is there can be transmission of typhoid fever. Okay, so those people are referred as carriers who carry this infection. And it is told that the carriers will excrete this bacilli for 6 to 8 weeks. But there are some people who are referred as chronic carriers. They can carry this typhoid infection for more than a year. Okay, they may not suffer with the some symptoms here, but they will carry the condition. Okay, especially whenever this Salmonella typhi, this organism remains in the gallbladder or in the biliary tract, what happens is they will tend to become carriers. So it is very essential that people who are working in these hotels or restaurants and all, they should be checked for the Salmonella typhi. So if at all they are carriers, they should not handle the food. Next is regarding the risk factors. Now, age, most of the time, any age people can get affected with enteric fever or typhoid. Commonly, it is seen in young adulthood period. Both the genders are equally affected, but females are told to be more of carriers. People with low immunity can get affected with enteric fever or typhoid. And the peak season when you will see this typhoid is in July to September, and it grows rapidly in milk, food, water, or ice and ice creams. So you have to be very careful when you're handling these things. Incubation period is 10 to 14 days. Next is typhoid is contagious. Yes, it is contagious as I have told, because most of the time the infected person or the carrier may be excreting this bacteria in the stool or in the feces or even in the urine, or even sometimes they may carry it whenever they are handling the food, or sometimes you can get the infection by drinking contaminated food or contaminated water. Next is pathophysiology. So as we are already aware, when you are drinking contaminated food and water, Salmonella typhi can enter your body. Okay, and next what happens is it will affect the Peyer's patch that is present in your intestine. Okay, so Peyer's patches may be affected. Because of that, it will affect your lymphatic system. Okay, so the bacteria will spread, multiply, and affect the lymphatic system. Along with that, what happens is it can be found or it will infect your liver, spleen, and gallbladder. Okay, and that will result in all the infection. fever will be there, abdominal pain may be there, spleen may be enlarged, liver may be enlarged. It can cause abdominal pain maybe because of gallbladder infection or because of cholecystitis. Okay, and further, if infection is not treated, it may cause sometimes complications like perforation, bleeding, and even death also. Next is the clinical manifestations. We have got prodromal stage, that is initial flu-like symptoms may be seen. Severe body pain, they will be there. Fever will be seen, and usually the patient may be very exhausted because of the fever. They may have headache, sore throat, cough may be there. Initially, they may have constipation. Later, what happens is after the fever develops, they may be having pea soup diarrhea. Okay, watery type of stools may be there. Leukopenia may be there, that is decrease in WBC count, abdominal pain, abdominal distension. And if this time you will send the urine and stool for salmonella, usually you will see that organism salmonella may be present. And in the later stages, the patient can have splenomegaly, that we have already discussed, enlargement of spleen, abdominal tenderness, maybe because of gallbladder infection. Then even rashes are seen in the patient with this typhoid or enteric fever. And rashes are commonly seen in the trunk region and it may disappear after 3 to 4 days. So this is all about that rashes, that is rosy spots we call them as, and they are pink color papules which are seen in the trunk region or in the back region of the patient. Next is complications of typhoid or enteric fever. Most of the time, since it is affecting your intestine, spleen, as well as your urinary system or even your kidneys, it can affect bones or joints may be affected. Gallbladder also may be affected. So it may result in intestinal hemorrhage, intestinal perforation. It can cause signs and symptoms of shock, that is hypotension, urine retention can happen. Respiratory symptoms like pneumonia may be seen in the patient. Sometimes they can also have cholecystitis, gallbladder infection, then myocarditis, inflammation of the myocardium, nephritis, osteomyelitis, weight loss may be seen, meningitis may be seen, bone infections are seen, arthritis can be seen, then pyelonephritis. So these are the common infections that will be seen or complications that will be seen because of typhoid. So it is very, very essential to continue the treatment or the management of this typhoid, that is most of the time antibiotics. Now, how to diagnose typhoid? Most of the time you can send a urine examination stool for the presence of salmonella. Next is you can do blood culture where you can find out the organism. You can also check the rashes. Sometimes you can do punch biopsy, that is, you can take the biopsy of these rashes and find out the organism. Other than that, other blood investigations like CBC can be done. Particular test that is done, that is called as a Widal test. So Widal test, in that they will detect O and H antibodies, and particularly remember Widal test is used to detect your typhoid or enteric fever. Okay, and then blood cultures, as we have already told. Now, treatment most of the time includes bed rest. You have to give antibiotics to the patient. You can also give corticosteroids. Then antipyretics is advised. Most of the time, advise the patient to drink more of oral fluids, IV fluids. Soft diet is advised for the patient. Now, when it comes to antibiotics, advise the patient they may be given chloramphenicol, ampicillin, or fluoroquinolone may be given, or ciprofloxacin, azithromycin. So, depending, usually the course may be given for up till 7 to 14 days. Next is regarding the diet. Usually soft diet is advised for the patient. Then small and frequent diet can be given. Then rest is very essential. Tell the patient not to go for the work and they have to stay in the home itself. Next is regarding the control of typhoid fever. So it is very essential to control this carriers and to maintain good sanitation as well as immunization is also essential. So early diagnosis should be done mainly by checking the stool or even the blood or the urine. Then notification also has to be done and isolate the person until they are 3 times negative. Okay, and then you can perform the disinfection of stool and urine by using chlorine of 2 percentage. Then next is you have to maintain good environmental sanitation, drink uh, boiled and cooled water itself, maintain or promote food hygiene. Do not allow the people who are carriers, especially with typhoid or that is Salmonella typhi, they should not handle the food. Then the food should not be consumed raw. See that you're always cooking the food well and consuming it. Then health education should be given regarding this typhoid condition. Then tell the patient to continue the treatment or continue the course. Then immunization is commonly given for typhoid fever. That is injectable. We have got typhoid vaccine. We have also got live oral vaccine. Then along with that, the TAB vaccine is also available. Particularly in the endemic regions, you may need to give the vaccines. So this is all about typhoid or enteric fever.